Growing your Wonder Kids into real superstars within Football Manager is one of the best parts of any save, but sometimes it can feel quite tough to get one of those great young players to reach their potential. Well, in today's video, I'll be giving you 5 tips, 5 different things you can do to increase your chances of that player becoming the star that they have the potential to be. So take a seat, kick back, and let's run you through these tips. Hi everyone, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and as mentioned, we'll be giving you 5 tips today to try and get your Wonder Kids from guys with great potential to guys with real ability, and the best ways to do so. If you do get any use out of this video, smash the like button for us and subscribe if you haven't already. If you've been watching the videos, we're pushing for 150,000 subscribers, so any support will be massively appreciated. With that being said, let's get into tip number 1. So here we are using my Leicester save, which if you want, you can check that out on my channel. It's a long running series that we've got. A lot of you guys have came over and said you've enjoyed it. All of the information for that is in the description. But in this Leicester save, you will see up here are facilities. Now, if you haven't got this skin on, and by the way, this is the Tato skin before anyone asks, to find it, you'll have to click into the club info section and then facilities, but it's here. I can see the training facilities we have, the youth facilities, junior coaching, and youth recruitment. Now, all of those outside of training facilities are to affect your youth intakes, but when them players actually come into your team, how can you get them to reach their potential? Well, one thing is, of course, the facilities that these players are playing at, and the better your training facilities, the higher the chance that these players are going to reach their potential. Imagine it as if you were playing on a pitch outside your house, or if you were playing at, Chelsea's academy or something. The equipment, the pitches you're playing on, it's all going to be much better and help to aid in your development. So make sure if you can that you're improving your training facilities as often as possible. If you're quite a beginner and you don't know how to do this, it's the club vision section. You make a board request and it will be under the facilities section. If there is the ability to improve the training facilities, you'll click that. The board will then say yes and no. If they say no, you might have a chance to convince them. Most of the time it will get accepted if you've got some finances in the bank and your club is fairly ambitious. Otherwise, you might have to convince them, but these facilities will help everyone, not just your younger players, but actually your older players in the first team, any young players in those first teams as well. And as some people don't realise, these training facilities are also for your under 18s and your under 21s. They don't use youth facilities, they use the training facilities. So make sure they're as high as possible. But speaking of under 21s and under 18s and under 19s, whatever you might have, let's move over to the Dev Centre, where we'll look at another aspect that will massively help your young players grow. So a lot of people, when it comes to their staff situation, will focus on having great staff up here in the main team, but so many people forget about the staff in the Dev Centre. So in the Dev Centre, your under 18s, your under 21s, your under 20s, whatever it is that you have, will have their own staff. It does get ignored by a lot of people, but to find it, you want to head over to the Dev Centre, then the staff section, and then you can break it down based on under 21s and under 18s. Now, the better your staff is here, as you can imagine, the better the training is going to be. The same way it works for your staff in the main team. As you can see here, the staff in my under 18s are very good, some of the best in their Premier League North division, and in the under 21s, it's also not too bad. You might be wondering how I've got it to this level. Well, I don't do any of the recruiting myself. I leave it all up to the director of football and the technical director, which you can find in the staff and then the responsibility section. You can select the staff section. Here you can delegate your job. So I've asked John Rudkin, the director of football, to hire and fire the coaching staff for the under 21s, the under 18s, and he did that job for me and brought in some very good staff members. So you don't always have to do it yourself, but try to ensure that you have the best staff possible. And here's why. Now, we're not going to run through an exact training schedule, a perfect training schedule. That'll come in a video later down the line. Instead, we're going to talk about training as a general whole. And one thing that a lot of people ignore is this section here, whether it's your under 21s or your under 18s. If you go into that tab and select training, you'll be shown this. Now, in the bottom right, you will see edit coach assignments. Now, my assistant has assigned it here. And what that does is it decides what staff member is going to cover which part of training. And at the bottom here, you will get a general idea of how good your team is in a certain area. So it looks like with 4 stars out of 5, in a lot of places 3.5 stars, that's great. But I'm identifying a weakness here, and that is our defending tactical section, where our best coach is only 2.5 stars, and it's our head of youth development who is doing that training for our under 18s. Now that makes me think, okay, I need to hire a staff member who has good defending tactical awareness to help with training there. And this is what you can do to identify weaknesses and strengths in your coaching departments for both your under 18s, or you can do the same thing in your under 21s, same section, exactly the same, it's just different staff members covering different areas. And it also works the same for your main team staff. If I go to training, then over to the coaching section and then edit coach assignments, you can see it for your first team too and get an idea of where you need to improve. Now, the better your staff is, the more they're going to be able to develop your young players and lead them to becoming superstars. If you have terrible staff and terrible facilities, the players aren't going to learn much, their attributes are going to develop slower, and it's going to take a lot longer for these players to reach their potential. So try to ensure that you are making your staff as good as possible. Another massive factor that you need to make sure you're considering in young player development is mentoring. Now, if you don't already know, mentoring is where you pick a player, usually a younger player, and you have an older head at the club, preferably a team leader. What will eventually happen, if all goes well, is the personality of the team leader, let's say he has 16 determination and your young player has 13, eventually it will start to rub off on the young player, and over time you'll see the young player becoming more aligned with their mentor in terms of a personality, their determination rating, and also sometimes some traits. But how can you mentor these young players? Because it's not always obvious. But what you need to do first is find some of the better young prospects that you think actually have a real chance of making it as, you know, a real big footballer for your side. So for me here, supposedly our highest potential player is this guy, Mick Peters. Now here, I can't give him any mentoring straight away. What I need to do is promote him from the under 18s to the senior squad, but don't worry just yet. He's still going to play football for the under 18s and I'll show you how. But first, let's move him into the senior squad. And now when I go over to that senior squad section, we will see Mick Peters here. Now straight away, I'm going to ensure that he is still playing for the under 18s or the under 21s, whatever it is, by going into the development section and available for under 18s for 90 minutes. This way, he's part of the first team and first team training, but will still get match experience by playing for the under 18. But now that he is part of that senior team, if I go to the training section and then mentoring, he will appear as a player that I can add to a mentoring group. So just for the sake of it right now, let me get rid of these mentoring groups and we'll make another one called Mick, for good old Mick Peters there. Now you can just ask your assistant to assign all of these, but if we want to show how it works for Mick specifically, I'm going to add player and then filter it by age to find Mick Peters. I'll then add him to our team section and then I'll try and look for the best personalities in the squad, which you can filter by clicking this personality tab. The worst we have is balance, but the best we have is a perfectionist in Tyrick Mitchell, but he's not exactly a team leader, so I'm not really going to go for that. Instead, I might want Berardi and Didi, let's say, and these guys are having an average effect on Mick Peters. Ideally, you'd want this to say significant, and that would mean he's getting a significant effect from these players and it increases the chances of attribute changes. Notice I don't say attribute growth because he still could have a significant effect but it be negative if you give him the wrong mentor. So if you mentored him with a player with 3 determination, let's say with a horrible personality who was a team leader in your squad, he would rub off those effects on that young player, which we don't want. We want players with good personalities, good determination, which will rub off on Mick Peters. So Domenico Berardi here, let's say, has a determination of 16 and Mick Peters' determination is 13. So over time, we should start seeing Mick Peters' determination increase a little bit and his personality may shift from fairly professional to fairly determined. If you have a model citizen or a determined personality, they will be great in terms of mentoring young players. This will help increase a player's determination, which over time will lead to them developing quicker and becoming a better player. Moving on to tip number 4 now, and make sure you stick around for the last one because it's one that I think a lot of people don't get right and it can completely destroy the way that a player grows in game. But anyway, moving on to tip 4, and that is individual training and positioning training. Now, as mentioned, I'm not going to talk about an exact training schedule that you need to do to get the best out of your players. We'll run those tests at some point, but right now we're talking about training in general. If you go to the development tab and then training, we want to make sure our players are training a role. This is much better for them than having no individual role training. We want to make sure we identify a role that this player could become good at. For example, Mick Peters here is never going to be a great ball playing centre back. back, but he could be a decent no-nonsense centre-back or even just a straight-up central defender, which works better in my tactics, and therefore I've chosen that as the actual role that I want him to train, and that will allow him to focus in on those individual attributes. Particularly with these young players, you want to make sure they've got an additional focus. I prefer to use it to iron out weaknesses, but you might want to use it to increase his strengths. But for me here, his passing is really poor and might let him down at the top level of his game. So for now, I'm going to focus on increasing his passing over time. So hopefully over the next couple of years, we'll see that increase. Now you can leave this all up to your assistants, which I do most of the time, but often with specific players, I will take control of their individual training, but it depends how much detail you want to go into. If you want to do every single player at your club, feel free to, but for me, I like to focus in on those players that I really want to see develop. And then the last part, of course, is your intensity level, which again has been set here by our coaches. Currently, he's on half intensity because his physical condition is so low and they're waiting for him to recover. But generally, you want your players to be on normal intensity if they're a young player. Now, double intensity, particularly for younger players, is risky because you're at the risk of injuring that player and also making them jaded, and then they won't develop as well. So I always suggest normal intensity. We don't want to be burning out these youngsters. Obviously, there's going to be individual cases where this may change, but always make sure you have a role focus and also an additional focus on your young players to see them developing. Combining this with good coaches, youth facilities and mentoring, the players will hopefully start to develop very well, as we're seeing with our young player here, Mick Peters, who recently is seeing a nice bit of attribute growth. But then it comes to tip number 5 and one of the most important things. How do we know when to give these players game time? How do we know whether to send them on loan or not? Let's cover it all now. The first thing that we should talk about is the fact that players under 18, they're not desperate for game time, right? If you've got a 16 or 17-year-old, in the world of Football Manager, the thing that will help them the most is just training and playing these youth teams. Yes, there might be an occasion where a 16 is your best player. Of course, give him match time, give him game experience, why not? But there's no need to really force these 16 or 17-year-olds into games straight away. Obviously, make sure they're playing for the under 18s, under 21s. But in these age groups, it's where training is the most important. It's when they hit about 18 years of age that we want to start getting them some senior match experience. If at this point they haven't developed already, I might even consider selling them. But when they get to 18 years of age, if they're not yet ready for the first team, and what I mean by that is if they're not getting, say, 10, 15 games a season, whether that's off the bench or not, that will be okay in your first team. But if they're going to get anything less than that, at an age of, say, 18, 19, we need to make sure they're getting consistent senior football. And to do that, we're going to send these players on loan. So for me, I would always say any player that is 18 or older who isn't getting game time in your first team that you think you want to see develop, send them on loan. But you've got to be careful of where you loan these players to and which kind of players you loan away. And we're going to get into that now. An example of a good loan would be this one for me. We've sent Ben Nelson out to Millwall in the Championship for a season, but when he went over there, we agreed for him to be a regular starter. And I would always suggest that if you are loaning a player out, make sure you're not just loaning them out to be a squad player or a fringe player somewhere. Even if it means they have to drop down an extra level further, make sure they're either a regular starter or maybe an important player, or even better, a star player, because that will mean that they'll get a lot of game time, and that is of course what they're going on loan for and what they need to grow. So far, Ben Nelson for us has gone out on loan to Millwall and done very well. He's getting consistent game time and developing a lot. Whether he'll ever make it into our first team is another question, but giving him this game time to develop raises his stock both for us and also if we're going to sell him later down the line. But there's a big thing you need to consider outside of just game time when you're loaning these players out, and it will be in this coach report section here. And what you're looking out for is anything that suggests adaptability. Now, if we look at Kavica Kvaratskhelia, the Georgian wonderkid who plays for Napoli in real life, he's joined Manchester City here and he's doing very, very well. And in his coach report, you will see just here, adaptability. It's green, dark green. That means he has a very high adaptability rating, which is a hidden attribute hidden under the hood between 1 and 20 in Football Manager. The higher this is, the better a player will be at adapting to another country. Now, if it was in his cons section as a red, that would mean his adaptability is low. If it was orange, it would be, say, 5 or 6, which again is still very low. And that would give me a lot of second thoughts about loaning a player out to another country, because the chances are they're not going to adapt. So be careful. If you plan to loan a player out and they have adaptability as a red con, that will likely mean they're not very adaptable and you don't want them going to another country for a loan. You want to keep them within your country so that they don't have to worry about adapting to life over there, which will stunt their development, stunt their game time, and we don't want to see that. If you don't see adaptability in the pros or cons section, it just means it's in the middle and really shouldn't have a massive effect, but I would still say if you can, try and get a player alone within your country. However, if you did have a player like Kavicha, obviously you're not going to send him on loan, but if you were going to, I would be very happy to send him on loan to another country because he is very adaptable and that will help him as he goes across seas to another league. So make sure if you're loaning a player out, you try and keep them within your country. But if you don't have many options and that player needs to go abroad for game time, just make sure that they don't have a red or an orange in the cons section for adaptability. If they do, that's going to affect their game and the way they develop overseas. So always keep that in mind. But that is the general rule of thumb for young players. If they're 18 or older, particularly 18 to 21, they've got a big chunk of development that they can do in those few years, and it's going to mean nothing to them if they just play under 21 football for the rest of their career. We need to get them out playing senior football. That will see them develop a lot more and become better players that will hopefully then be able to influence your first team and develop into the stars that we know that they can be. So there's 5 tips to make sure that you're training your young players the best way possible. Let me know in the comments if you use all 5 of these tips. Smash the like button for us, subscribe for more, and feel free to check out my channel and my Leicester save in the description down below. But most of all, have a great day everybody, and I'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.